You are not stuck because you lack potential. You are stuck because you are living along a trajectory that is repeated every day without ever stopping to change it. Right now, your life does not reflect who you could become, but reflects what you are doing unconsciously. And if you continue living this way, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, the results will still look the same as today. This video is not here to make you feel comfortable. It is here to wake you up, to show you why your effort has not created a breakthrough and what truly determines whether a person changes their life or continues standing still. If you are still searching for motivation from the outside, if you are still waiting for a perfect moment, then you are handing control of your life over to inertia. And within the next few minutes, you will begin to see one important truth clearly. The world does not need to change first. You are the starting point of every transformation. Begins at a very familiar moment when you feel you have tried long enough but life keeps repeating the same outcomes. Not because you are lazy, not because you are incapable, but because you are living inside an old trajectory programmed by patterns of thinking and acting that you have never truly questioned. There comes a time in life when exhaustion no longer comes from work or external circumstances, but from the sense of powerlessness, when you realize that no matter how long you wait, everything remains the same. You begin to wonder why some people change quickly while you stay stuck for years. The truth lies in a very simple point that few people have the courage to face. No turning point happens until you decide to invest in yourself consciously and completely. Most people place their hope in luck, in the right timing, or in a push from the outside. But life does not work that way. Change does not come from the outside pouring in, but from the inside being built day by day. When you live in automatic reaction mode, you allow the past to control the present and the present to copy the future. You repeat the same way of thinking, the same way of reacting, the same way of postponing, and then wonder why the results do not change. The moment of awakening begins when you stop blaming and start looking directly at your role in your own life. Not to condemn yourself, but to reclaim control. Right now, you may feel slightly uncomfortable because this truth is not easy to hear, but that discomfort is the sign that you are touching something important. Life does not owe you a better version, it only reflects who you are becoming each day. If you do not actively upgrade yourself, the old trajectory will continue to pull you back to familiar outcomes. The awakening point is not an explosive emotion. It is a clear silence when you realize that if you keep living the same way 5 or 10 years from now, nothing will be different. And that very moment opens a door that leads to responsibility, but also to freedom. When you understand that change is within your reach, you stop waiting and start choosing. Choosing a different way of thinking, choosing different actions, choosing a different discipline. Not to become a perfect person, but to become someone who no longer lets their life drift on inertia. Part 1 ends here, not with a grand promise, but with a solid truth. Your life begins to change the moment you decide that self-improvement is no longer an optional choice, but a non-negotiable commitment. Opens when you begin to look deeper into how human beings actually operate, rather than how you were told they do. Most people believe their lives are determined by circumstances, by their starting point, or by things beyond their control. But the foundational truth lies at a deeper level where very few are willing to pause and observe. Human beings do not live by rare major decisions, but by small choices repeated every single day. Your brain is designed to conserve energy, not to create change. It loves familiarity because familiarity signals safety. That is why it constantly pulls you back to old thoughts, old reactions, and old behaviors, even when they no longer serve you. This is why you can know many correct things yet still act in the opposite way. Not because you lack knowledge, but because the internal system is running on inertia. Every time you react instead of choosing, every time you postpone instead of facing something, you reinforce an old neural pathway. Over time, those pathways become the map that guides your life. You call it personality, but in reality, it is a habit repeated long enough. When you understand this, you begin to see clearly why most people stay trapped in the same loop for years. They change goals, but do not change the internal operating system. They want new results while keeping the same way of living. They hope for a different future while the present is still built on the same logic. The true mechanism of change does not lie in temporary excitement, but in whether you have the patience to rebuild your internal structure. Each day you wake up with the same thinking pattern. You are casting a vote for the person you will become. Each time you choose to avoid what is difficult, you teach your brain that safety matters more than growth. And the brain remembers that very quickly. It learns that creating fatigue or doubt is enough to make you stop. This is not personal weakness, but an ancient survival mechanism. But if you do not recognize it, it will control you for life. The difference between those who move forward and those who stay stuck does not lie in intelligence or luck, but in the level of self-awareness. Those who move forward understand that emotions are not commands, thoughts are not facts, and comfort is not a sign that you are on the right path. They learn to observe themselves as a system. When fatigue appears, they do not immediately believe they must stop. When doubt appears, they do not assume they are incapable. They understand these are simply signals of the brain trying to protect the familiar zone, and it is precisely at this moment that change finds ground to take root. You begin to realize that most decisions in your life are not made consciously. They are triggered by environment, by emotions, and by old beliefs you have never examined. When you live this way, you are not truly choosing, you are merely reacting, and a life built on reaction will always be passive. Understanding this mechanism gives you a powerful advantage. You no longer blame yourself when you see old mistakes repeating. Instead, you become curious. You observe. You ask, what triggered this reaction? What is trying to control my behavior? And each time you ask such a question, you reclaim a piece of power that was handed over to inertia. Human beings do not need more motivation to change. They need clarity about how they are being unconsciously driven every day. When clarity appears, you begin to understand that to change results, you must change how you live in each small moment. Not by fighting yourself, but by redesigning what surrounds you. Human mechanisms are brutally honest. They always deliver results that match the system you are running. If that system is built on procrastination, lack of discipline, and emotional reaction, the results will reflect that. But if you begin to change each small gear in that system, thinking habits, environment, then the entire direction gradually shifts. Part 2 ends when you begin to see one essential truth. You are not stuck because you are not good enough. You are stuck because you were never taught how to operate yourself consciously. And the moment you understand this mechanism, you are already standing in a different position than before. You are no longer a victim of circumstance. You become the observer of the system, and the observer always has the power to change the game. Go straight to the place most people underestimate, yet the one that most powerfully determines an entire lifetime, which is daily habits that seem small and insignificant. You may not realize this, but your life today is the direct result of what you have repeatedly done over many years, not of one major decision, not a special moment, not a rare opportunity, but ordinary daily choices have quietly shaped the person you are becoming. Habits are not loud. They do not demand attention. They operate in the background of life, and that is exactly why they are dangerous if you are not aware of their power. The way you wake up each morning, how you respond to pressure, what you choose to do when you are tired, how you use your free time, all of it is leaving an imprint on your identity. You are not just performing an action, you are sending a message to yourself saying, "This is who I am," and the brain records that message very seriously. When you procrastinate repeatedly, you are not just delaying work. You are teaching your brain that avoidance is a valid strategy. When you break small promises to yourself, you are not just missing an action, you are damaging the internal trust that you are someone you can rely on. Over time, these small messages accumulate and form a larger story about who you are. You call it personality, but in reality it is a habit reinforced long enough. This is why change feels difficult, not because the new action is too demanding, but because it threatens the old identity you have grown used to. When you try to build a new habit, the brain does not resist because the action is hard, but because it does not match your current self-image. If you have lived for years as someone who gives up easily, then even a few days of consistency creates internal conflict, and the brain will do everything it can to pull you back to the familiar state. It generates fatigue, doubt, and reasonable excuses to make you stop. This is not laziness, but an identity protection mechanism. But this is exactly where the true power of habits appears. Every habit you repeat not only produces external results, but also reaffirms who you are internally. When you choose to read a few minutes each day, you are gradually becoming someone who values knowledge. When you choose to move your body consistently, you are becoming someone who respects your body and energy. When you choose to plan your day, you are becoming someone who lives with intention. These changes do not happen overnight, but they are sustainable because they do not depend on emotion. Habits are the bridge between desire and identity. They turn what you want into what you are. Most people fail at change not because they choose the wrong habits, but because they start with the wrong expectations. They believe habits must be big, difficult, and produce fast results. And when results do not appear immediately, they quit. But habits are not designed to impress. They are designed to accumulate. A small habit is easy enough that you do not need to negotiate with yourself every day, yet meaningful enough to guide you over time. When you understand this, you stop chasing explosions and start building stability. You no longer ask whether you feel motivated today. You ask, what is the minimum promise you can keep to yourself today? This consistency is what truly restructures your life. Habits are also where you learn a profound lesson about control. No matter how chaotic your day is, you always have the ability to choose one small action that affirms you are still steering. When you do this, day after day, you build a strong psychological foundation that your life is not entirely dictated by circumstances. You begin to feel that you have a voice in your own life. And this feeling matters because it is the foundation of real confidence. Not confidence from external praise, but confidence from knowing you can do what you promised, even when no one is watching. Habits also teach you about time. They help you accept that real growth does not come from dramatic leaps, but from not quitting on ordinary days. You learn to respect the process instead of obsessing over outcomes, and that frees you from the pressure to change immediately. When you allow yourself to move slowly but steadily, you begin to go farther than most people. Part 3 closes with an important realization. You do not need to change your entire life in one decision. You only need to start changing what you do each day with awareness, because those repeated actions are quietly writing the larger story of your life. And once you understand that you are writing that story every day, you no longer underestimate small choices. You begin to use them as tools to build the person you want to become. Begins when you encounter the invisible wall that almost everyone faces on the path of change, which is the internal conflict between the person you want to become and the person you have been familiar with for many years. This is the most difficult stage, not because you do not know what to do, but because everything inside you starts to resist. One part of you wants to move forward, wants discipline, wants to live differently. But another part wants to return to the safe zone, where you do not have to feel pressure, do not have to face the possibility of failure, and do not have to take full responsibility for your life. These two parts coexist and pull you in opposite directions. And if you do not understand what is happening, you can easily believe that you are not strong enough or not suited for change. The truth is that this conflict is a sign that you are stepping out of your old identity. The old self does not disappear quietly. It resists. It uses very subtle strategies. It creates fatigue the moment you start a new habit. It plants doubt about whether this effort is really worth it. It reminds you of past failures as proof that you will fail again. And if you are not aware enough, you will mistake these signals for truth. You will think you are going in the wrong direction when in reality you are moving more correctly than ever before. Internal conflict is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of transformation. Whenever you break an old pattern, the internal system will try to pull you back. This happens because your brain prioritizes familiarity over correctness. It does not ask whether this is good for your future. It only asks whether this resembles the past it already knows. And if the answer is no, it activates discomfort. That discomfort is easy to misunderstand. You may label it as lack of motivation, laziness, or loss of inspiration, but in reality, it is the collision between two identities. One is the old version that has existed long enough to become the default. The other is the new version that has not yet accumulated enough action to be trusted. And during this stage, you will often feel caught in between. No longer as comfortable as before, but not yet solid enough to move forward with confidence. Many people quit here not because they cannot change, but because they do not understand that this discomfort is an essential part of the process. They believe that correct change should feel good immediately, but real change often feels inconvenient before it feels freeing. During this period of conflict, your emotions become unreliable. You will have days of strong determination and days of deep doubt. If you rely on emotions to decide your actions, you will keep turning back. This is where many people sabotage themselves by negotiating with themselves. They allow just one day off, then another day, and very quickly they return to the old trajectory. Not because they do not want to change, but because they failed to draw a clear boundary between listening to themselves and being manipulated by the old self. Internal conflict also reveals itself most clearly in the way you talk to yourself. The inner voice may become harsh or sarcastic. It reminds you that you have tried before and failed. It compares you to others to make you feel slow. It magnifies small mistakes to convince you that the entire effort is meaningless. If you do not recognize this voice, you will mistake it for objective truth. But in reality, it is only the echo of the old identity trying to keep its position. What matters in this stage is not eliminating the conflict, but understanding it and moving through it with maturity. You do not need to fight yourself. You need to learn not to obey every thought that appears in your mind. Thoughts are not commands. Emotions are not instructions. They are signals, and you get to decide how to respond. When you feel like you do not want to continue, it does not mean you should stop. It only means you are doing something new, and your brain is not used to it yet. When you understand this, you begin to shift from reaction to choice. You no longer ask whether you feel like doing it. You ask whether this aligns with the person you are building, and that question changes everything. Internal conflict is also where you learn the first lesson about real strength. Strength is not always feeling motivated. Strength is the ability to continue acting when you are uncertain, when you are tired, and when no one is cheering. Each time you move through a moment of conflict like this, you are not just completing an action, you are weakening the old identity and reinforcing the new one. You are proving to yourself that you are no longer fully controlled by emotion and inertia, and this accumulates very quickly, even if you do not notice it immediately. This stage also requires deep honesty. You need to admit that there is a part of you that prefers stagnation because it is familiar, not to blame yourself, but to stop being deceived. When you face this directly, you can design smarter strategies. You do not try to be perfect. You only need to be consistent enough not to turn back. You simplify actions to reduce friction. You design your environment so you do not have to rely on willpower constantly. And you accept that there will be days you do not perform well, but you do not use that as an excuse to quit. Part 4 ends when you begin to notice a subtle shift. The conflict is still there, but it no longer paralyzes you. You start to become familiar with discomfort. You understand that it is not destroying you but training you. And for the first time you feel that you are no longer being completely pulled back and forth between two selves. You are standing more firmly on the side of who you want to become. Not because the conflict has disappeared, but because you have learned how to walk with it without letting it decide for you. Begins when you realize an uncomfortable but essential truth that motivation is not enough to build a different life. Motivation comes and goes with emotions, circumstances, and daily energy levels. There are mornings when you feel capable of doing everything, and there are days when a small obstacle is enough to make you want to give up entirely. If you place your future in the hands of motivation, you are handing control to the most unstable part of yourself. This is where discipline appears not as a rigid concept but as a pillar that replaces fragile emotions. Discipline is not forcing yourself to suffer. Discipline is the ability to do what needs to be done even when you do not feel like doing it. And that ability creates the greatest difference between those who move forward steadily and those who remain in the same place. Most people wait until they feel ready before they act. Discipline reverses that order. You act first, and emotion follows. When you do the right thing without enthusiasm, you teach your brain that you are reliable, and that reliability does not come from words but from repeated action. Each time you do what you committed to, even when no one is watching, you are building a new relationship with yourself. A relationship based on respect. This is something many people lack without realizing it. They do not trust themselves because they have promised and failed too many times. Discipline begins by ending that loop, not by setting standards that are too high, but by setting standards that are clear and keeping them. When you know exactly what is non-negotiable, you no longer have to negotiate every day, and that constant negotiation is what exhausts you. Each morning, if you have to ask yourself whether you should do something, you have already spent energy before you begin. Discipline removes that ambiguity. It says this is what gets done regardless of how you feel today. And when that becomes the default, you free up a great amount of mental energy for more important things. Discipline is not built through explosive efforts. It is built through consistency. Many people start strong but do not last. They do too much in a short time, burn out and quit. That does not create discipline. It creates a cycle of frustration. True discipline grows when you do little enough to sustain, but consistently enough to build momentum. When you show up every day, even at a minimum level, you are reinforcing a habit more powerful than any intense burst of effort. And over time, that steadiness becomes strength. Discipline is also where you learn to take responsibility without punishing yourself. There will be days you do not perform well. There will be times you slip off the plan. Discipline does not demand perfection. It demands that you return quickly. Instead of using a small mistake as a reason to abandon everything, you learn to treat it as feedback. You adjust. You continue. A person without discipline uses mistakes to justify stopping. A disciplined person uses mistakes to improve the system. This is the critical difference. Discipline also forces you to confront the truth about your priorities. You may say something matters to you, but if you consistently do not give it time and energy, then the truth lies in your actions, not in your words. Discipline brings this honesty into the light. It does not judge, but it does not allow self-deception. And that clarity, while uncomfortable at first, is deeply liberating in the long run. You no longer live in the vague feeling that you are trying. You know whether you are acting or not. Discipline is also the foundation of real freedom. Many people think discipline means losing freedom because it creates constraints. The reality is the opposite. Without discipline, you are led by emotion, distraction, and circumstance. You react instead of choose. Discipline gives you the ability to act according to values rather than temporary feelings. And that is a higher level of freedom. Freedom is not doing whatever you want in the moment. Freedom is the ability to build the life you want over time. Discipline also teaches you how to face discomfort without escaping it. Each time you do something difficult, you expand your capacity to endure. You no longer fear discomfort because you are familiar with moving through it. This does not only help in work or habits, but in every area of life. You become steadier under pressure. You do not collapse under small obstacles. You trust that you can handle what arises because you have repeatedly done hard things without quitting. Discipline also builds consistency in identity. When you do the right thing repeatedly, you do not need to convince anyone that you are serious. You do not need to remind yourself that you are trying. You know who you are because your actions say it every day. This confidence is quiet but solid. It does not depend on praise or immediate results. It comes from knowing that when it matters, you will show up. This is a kind of confidence that is hard to take away. Part 5 also clarifies that discipline is not something you are born with or without. It is a skill, and like any skill, it can be trained. Each time you choose to act instead of procrastinate, you are training it. Each time you return after slipping, you are strengthening it. You do not need to become perfectly disciplined. You only need to become more disciplined than yesterday, and that is entirely within your control. Discipline does not require ideal conditions. It works best on non-ideal days. It is precisely on tired, busy, and unmotivated days that discipline makes the clearest difference. And each day you overcome like that, you are building a foundation you can rely on later when life tests you at a higher level. Part 5 closes when you begin to see discipline differently. No longer as a burden or coercion, but as a form of future care. Each disciplined action today is a shield for tomorrow. It protects you from regret, from helplessness, and from looking back on life with the question, what if? When you choose discipline, you are not just completing a task. You are telling yourself that this life is worth building with seriousness. And that attitude is what begins to change everything. Begins when you realize that discipline can only be sustainable if your mindset is properly restructured. You can force yourself to act for a while, but if the way you think about yourself, about difficulty, and about life does not change, you will eventually return to the same place. Mindset is where every decision is born, and if you do not master your thinking, you will always be pulled along by automatic reactions. Most people believe their thoughts are the truth. They believe every idea that appears in their mind as if it were a fixed verdict. When a negative thought arises, they immediately act on it. When fear appears, they immediately retreat. But the truth is that thoughts are merely products of past experiences, temporary emotions, and mental habits. They are not commands, they are data, and you have the right to choose how to respond. Restructuring mindset begins with creating a pause between stimulus and reaction. That pause is small but powerful. In that pause, you are no longer swept away instantly. You have time to observe what is happening inside you. You recognize that you are having a thought, not that you are that thought. This separation protects you from many poor decisions. When you no longer identify with every thought that appears, you begin to reclaim control. You do not need to eliminate negative thoughts. You simply need to stop letting them drive. Most chaos in life comes from people reacting emotionally before reason has a chance to intervene. When stress appears, you say things you later regret. When fear appears, you avoid things that could help you grow. When fatigue appears, you quit earlier than necessary. Restructuring mindset does not remove these states, but helps you avoid being controlled by them. You learn to ask better questions. Instead of asking why this is so hard for me, you ask, what about this is challenging me, and what can I learn from it? Instead of asking whether you are good enough, you ask what the most reasonable next step is. These questions shift you from a victim state to an active state. Mindset also directly affects how you interpret challenges. Two people can face the same difficulty and react completely differently. A fear-driven mindset sees challenge as proof of inadequacy. A restructured mindset sees it as a test to build capability. The difference is not in circumstance, but in perspective. And perspective can be trained. You do not need to be positive all the time. You only need to be realistic enough not to exaggerate problems and calm enough not to make decisions at emotional peaks. A resilient mindset understands that difficulty is part of the process, not a sign that you are on the wrong path. When you understand this, you no longer panic at obstacles. You begin to see them as signals to adjust strategy rather than reasons to quit. Restructuring mindset also involves how you talk to yourself. Your inner voice can be a guide or a saboteur. If every mistake is followed by harsh criticism, you gradually lose the desire to continue, not because you are weak, but because no one can grow in a hostile environment, even when that environment exists in their own mind. A mature mindset does not deny mistakes, but does not use them to diminish self-worth. You learn to evaluate actions without judging identity. I did not do this well is very different from I am a failure. This distinction is crucial because it allows improvement without paralysis from shame. Mindset also shapes identity. What you repeat in your mind each day gradually becomes how you see yourself. If you constantly tell yourself you are undisciplined, you will act like someone who is undisciplined. But if you shift to telling yourself you are learning to become more disciplined, you create space for progress. Identity is not fixed. It is built daily through how you interpret your experiences. Restructuring mindset allows you to rewrite your personal narrative, not by sugarcoating reality but by seeing it more accurately. You are not the sum of past failures. You are someone in the process of learning and adjusting. When you accept this, the pressure to be perfect decreases and persistence increases. A restructured mindset also helps you manage expectations. Many people quit not because they are not progressing, but because they expect progress to happen faster than reality allows. When reality does not match expectation, they assume their effort is meaningless. A mature mindset understands that sustainable growth is always slow and non-linear. There are phases where you feel like you are not moving forward, but in truth, you are laying foundations. When you accept this rhythm, you no longer panic when results do not appear immediately. You keep working because you understand the process is unfolding, even if you cannot yet see it. Restructuring mindset also involves controlling where you place your attention. Your energy follows your attention. If you constantly focus on what you lack, you will feel lacking. If you constantly focus on what you cannot control, you will feel powerless. When you learn to redirect attention to small actions you can take today, you restore a sense of agency. You do not need to solve your entire life. You only need to handle the next step. This way of thinking creates a powerful calm. It allows you to move forward without overwhelm. Another important part of restructuring mindset is learning not to tie self-worth to immediate results. There are days you do the right thing and results do not arrive yet. If you measure your value only by outcomes, you will become discouraged. But if you measure it by whether you did what needed to be done, you sustain intrinsic motivation. You begin to reward effort, not only success. This is critical in long journeys. This mindset helps you stand firm, even when no one recognizes your progress yet. And that firmness is the foundation of inner strength. Part 6 also emphasizes that mindset does not change from hearing something once or reading something once. It changes through repeated practice. Each day you have opportunities to choose a different way of thinking. You will not always succeed, but every time you do, you create a new pathway in the brain. Over time, that pathway becomes the main road. You begin to respond differently, more naturally. You no longer need to force yourself as much as before. The new mindset gradually becomes the default. Part 6 closes when you realize that mastering mindset is not about controlling every thought, but about choosing which thoughts you allow to guide your actions. You are no longer swept away by temporary emotions. You no longer believe that your current feeling is the final truth. You understand that you have the ability to choose responses aligned with the person you are building. And when you have that ability, you hold one of the most powerful tools for changing your life in a sustainable way. Begins when you understand that willpower is not something you can use endlessly, and if you constantly rely on it, you will eventually burn out. Many people fail not because they lack determination, but because they place themselves in conditions where doing the right thing is too difficult and doing the wrong thing is too easy. Human beings do not live in a vacuum. You are shaped every day by your environment, from the space you inhabit, the people you interact with, to the things that remain constantly within your sight and reach. If your environment continuously triggers distraction, procrastination, and emotional reaction, then you will have to fight constantly to maintain discipline, and that fight cannot last forever. Building a life structure is the intelligent way to reduce internal resistance instead of trying to be stronger every day. When you design the right environment, you no longer need to constantly convince yourself to do the right thing. The right thing becomes the default choice. Environment is not only physical space, but also rhythm, habits, time, and relationships. Each of these elements has the power to move you forward or hold you back. If you wake up every day in a cluttered space, your mind will begin the day in a scattered state. If you are constantly around people who do not respect your efforts to change, you will gradually begin to doubt yourself. If your schedule lacks clear structure, you will always feel busy but never progress. Life structure is not rigidity. It is a support system that helps you make good decisions even when you are tired. When you have fixed times for important activities, you no longer need to think about when to do them. When you prepare the necessary tools for your habits in advance, you significantly reduce the likelihood of procrastination. When you remove distractions from your line of sight, you reduce the number of internal battles you must fight. This is not controlling yourself through pressure, but guiding yourself through design. One common mistake is trying to change behavior without changing environment. You want to focus more, but your phone is always beside you. You want to sleep earlier, but light and noise never stop. You want to eat healthier, but the easiest options are the ones that drain your energy. Under such conditions, failure says nothing about you. It only says that the system is working against your goals. When you change the system, new behavior no longer requires excessive effort to maintain. Life structure also relates to how you organize your time. Many people live in reaction mode. They work based on what appears in front of them rather than what matters most. The day passes in a series of urgent tasks, but none of them truly bring them closer to long-term goals. When you do not control your time, time controls you. Building life structure begins with identifying anchor points in your day, fixed periods dedicated to key actions. When these anchors are placed correctly, your day has shape. And when your day has shape, your mind becomes calmer. You no longer feel lost, because you know you are moving within a chosen order. Structure also helps you protect energy. Not every hour of the day has equal value. There are periods when you focus better, think more clearly, and have higher energy. When you place important work into those windows, you achieve more with less effort. Conversely, when you let important tasks drift to the end of the day when energy is depleted, you must rely heavily on willpower, and results are often poor. Designing a smart life structure means working with your biological rhythm rather than against it. The social environment is also an essential factor. Humans are deeply influenced by those around them, whether they realize it or not. If you are in an environment where complaining is normal and effort is undervalued, you will gradually lower your own standards. Conversely, when you are around people who value growth, you naturally raise your expectations of yourself. This does not mean you must cut off all relationships. It means you must be conscious of the influence each relationship has on your direction. You can choose to spend more time with connections that support growth and less time with interactions that drain you. This is not selfishness. This is responsibility for your own life. Life structure also includes the boundaries you set. Boundaries with time, boundaries with attention, and boundaries with external demands. When you lack boundaries, you are constantly pulled away from what matters. You say yes too often and then have no energy left for what truly matters. When you learn to say no clearly and respectfully, you do not lose freedom, you reclaim it. Boundaries protect your focus and safeguard commitments to yourself. A good life structure does not need to be complicated. It needs to be suitable to your current rhythm, suitable to your energy level, and suitable to the stage you are in. Many people copy someone else's system, then fail, and conclude they lack discipline. But the problem is not you. It is that the structure does not reflect your reality. A good structure is one you can maintain even on non-ideal days. It is flexible enough to adjust yet clear enough not to be abandoned. Life structure also helps reduce mental load. When you have already decided what matters, you no longer have to make so many decisions each day. And every decision you do not have to make is energy preserved. This creates a subtle but significant sense of lightness. You no longer feel the constant need to think about what to do next. You know, and you act. When life runs more smoothly at the foundational level, you gain more space for creativity, presence, and handling more complex challenges. Part 7 also clarifies that structure is not the final goal. It is a means. You do not build structure to control life, but to free yourself from unnecessary chaos. When structure is properly placed, you no longer have to constantly fight yourself. You begin to feel supported rather than forced. This creates an important shift in daily experience. Moving forward no longer feels heavy. It becomes more natural. Part 7 closes when you realize that sustainable success rarely comes from short bursts of heroic effort. It comes from well-designed systems that allow you to do the right thing repeatedly without battling yourself every day. When you build a suitable life structure, you do not only increase your chances of success, you increase your ability to sustain the new person you are becoming. And that is what gives this change the opportunity to last. Begins when you realize that your potential is not a fixed limit, but a space that can expand if you are willing to learn with intention. Many people live their entire lives within the same familiar skill loop and then believe their world is small because of circumstances. But the truth is that opportunities open for those who continuously upgrade their own abilities. When you learn a new skill, you do not just add a tool to your hands, you also change the way you see life. You begin to notice possibilities you did not recognize before. You realize that many doors once thought to be closed were not locked at all, but simply required a key you did not yet have. Learning is a process that trains mental flexibility. It forces you to accept the feeling of not knowing, the feeling of awkwardness, and the feeling of slow progress. These very feelings cultivate patience and humility. Each time you allow yourself to be a beginner, you break a dangerous belief that your value depends on being good from the start. When that belief dissolves, you are free to learn without the pressure of perfection. And within that freedom, ability grows much faster. Skill does not develop in a single explosive moment. It develops through deliberate repetition. Each time you practice, you are refining the brain to recognize patterns, to respond more accurately, and to solve problems more effectively. Whether the skill is communication, analytical thinking, creativity, time management, or a specific technical ability, the principle is the same. Consistency creates mastery, mastery creates confidence, and confidence opens opportunity. When you learn consistently, you begin to notice a subtle shift in how you face the unknown. Instead of fear, you feel curiosity. Instead of avoidance, you experiment. This matters deeply because the world is constantly changing, and those who do not learn are left behind. Not because they are incapable, but because they stand still. Learning also expands your capacity for connection. Each new skill brings you into new environments, with new people and new perspectives. You begin to meet others who value growth as you do. You exchange ideas. You learn from each other's mistakes. These connections do not only create external opportunities, they also reinforce internal identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who is developing rather than someone who is stuck. This identity is powerful because it influences every decision you make afterward. When facing a challenge, you no longer ask whether you are capable enough. You ask what you need to learn to handle this. That question shifts you from helplessness to agency. Learning also teaches you to respect the process. There are periods when progress is very slow. There are moments when you feel like you are standing still. If you focus only on outcomes, you will become discouraged. But if you focus on practicing correctly, you will continue. And that continuation creates breakthroughs you do not expect. Many people quit just before accumulation becomes visible. When you understand this principle, you stop rushing. You patiently build foundations. Skills also increase your value in a very concrete way. The world does not reward desire. The world rewards problem-solving ability. When you have skills, you do not need to convince anyone of your value. That value shows itself through the results you create. This produces a deep confidence because it is rooted in capability rather than recognition. You know that even if circumstances change, you can adapt because you know how to learn and relearn. This creates a profound sense of security that does not depend on a single position or role. Learning also expands your independence. When you have more skills, you rely less on others. If you need to solve a problem, you can research and figure it out. If you want to create an opportunity, you can begin building it. This independence nourishes self-respect because you no longer feel that you must wait for someone to rescue you. You become the person who actively creates your own path. Learning also strongly influences long-term thinking. When you become comfortable investing time today for benefits tomorrow, you begin making wiser decisions. You are no longer overly seduced by immediate rewards. You are willing to accept delay in exchange for sustainability. This is a significant maturation because it affects every other area of life, from finances to relationships. Another crucial aspect is that learning helps you redefine failure. When learning becomes the primary goal, mistakes turn into data. Each time you fail, you do not diminish yourself. You analyze what did not work and adjust. This attitude carries you far beyond those who fear mistakes, because those who fear mistakes do not try, and those who do not try do not learn. When you accept error as part of learning, you free yourself from the fear of damaging your image. You focus on real progress. Learning also keeps the mind young and flexible. When you engage with new ideas, you break old assumptions. You are no longer trapped in one-dimensional thinking. This makes you more creative in problem-solving and more effective in communication. You understand that there are many ways to view a situation, and this flexibility reduces internal conflict. You no longer cling rigidly to the old ego. You become open to updating yourself. Intentional learning means you do not learn randomly. You learn what serves your direction. You choose skills aligned with your goals and values. When learning is connected to purpose, intrinsic motivation remains strong. You know why you are investing time and energy. This helps you move through inevitable periods of boredom. You do not learn to prove anything to anyone. You learn to become capable of living the life you want. Part 8 also emphasizes that learning has no finish line. It is a way of life. When you stop learning, you begin to contract. When you continue learning, you continue to expand. And that expansion does not only happen outwardly, but inwardly as well. You become more confident, calmer, and less threatened by change. You know that whatever lies ahead, you can learn how to handle it. Part 8 closes when you begin to feel a clear shift. You no longer see yourself as someone limited by current circumstances. You see yourself as someone accumulating capability. Each skill you learn expands the territory of your life. And as you continue to expand step by step, you realize that the world is not as small as you once believed. It was simply waiting for you to become capable enough to enter. Begins when you realize that your potential is not a fixed limit, but a space that can expand if you are willing to learn with intention. Many people live their entire lives within the same familiar skill loop and then believe their world is small because of circumstances. But the truth is that opportunities open for those who continuously upgrade their own abilities. When you learn a new skill, you do not just add a tool to your hands, you also change the way you see life. You begin to notice possibilities you did not recognize before. You realize that many doors once thought to be closed were not locked at all, but simply required a key you did not yet have. Learning is a process that trains mental flexibility. It forces you to accept the feeling of not knowing, the feeling of awkwardness, and the feeling of slow progress. These very feelings cultivate patience and humility. Each time you allow yourself to be a beginner, you break a dangerous belief that your value depends on being good from the start. When that belief dissolves, you are free to learn without the pressure of perfection, and within that freedom, ability grows much faster. Skill does not develop in a single explosive moment. It develops through deliberate repetition. Each time you practice, you are refining the brain to recognize patterns, to respond more accurately, and to solve problems more effectively. Whether the skill is communication, analytical thinking, creativity, time management, or a specific technical ability, the principle is the same. Consistency creates mastery. Mastery creates confidence, and confidence opens opportunity. When you learn consistently, you begin to notice a subtle shift in how you face the unknown. Instead of fear, you feel curiosity. Instead of avoidance, you experiment. This matters deeply because the world is constantly changing, and those who do not learn are left behind. not because they are incapable, but because they stand still. Learning also expands your capacity for connection. Each new skill brings you into new environments, with new people and new perspectives. You begin to meet others who value growth as you do. You exchange ideas, you learn from each other's mistakes. These connections do not only create external opportunities, they also reinforce internal identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who is developing rather than someone who is stuck. This identity is powerful because it influences every decision you make afterward. When facing a challenge, you no longer ask whether you are capable enough. You ask what you need to learn to handle this. That question shifts you from helplessness to agency. Learning also teaches you to respect the process. There are periods when progress is very slow. There are moments when you feel like you are standing still. If you focus only on outcomes, you will become discouraged. But if you focus on practicing correctly, you will continue. And that continuation creates breakthroughs you do not expect. Many people quit just before accumulation becomes visible. When you understand this principle, you stop rushing. You patiently build foundations. Skills also increase your value in a very concrete way. The world does not reward desire. The world rewards problem-solving ability. When you have skills, you do not need to convince anyone of your value. That value shows itself through the results you create. This produces a deep confidence because it is rooted in capability rather than recognition. You know that even if circumstances change, you can adapt because you know how to learn and relearn. This creates a profound sense of security that does not depend on a single position or role. Learning also expands your independence. When you have more skills, you rely less on others. If you need to solve a problem, you can research and figure it out. If you want to create an opportunity, you can begin building it. This independence nourishes self-respect because you no longer feel that you must wait for someone to rescue you. You become the person who actively creates your own path. Learning also strongly influences long-term thinking. When you become comfortable investing time today for benefits tomorrow, you begin making wiser decisions. You are no longer overly seduced by immediate rewards. You are willing to accept delay in exchange for sustainability. This is a significant maturation because it affects every other area of life, from finances to relationships. Another crucial aspect is that learning helps you redefine failure. When learning becomes the primary goal, mistakes turn into data. Each time you fail, you do not diminish yourself. You analyze what did not work and adjust. This attitude carries you far beyond those who fear mistakes. Because those who fear mistakes do not try, and those who do not try do not learn. When you accept error as part of learning, you free yourself from the fear of damaging your image. You focus on real progress. Learning also keeps the mind young and flexible. When you engage with new ideas, you break old assumptions. You are no longer trapped in one-dimensional thinking. This makes you more creative in problem-solving and more effective in communication. You understand that there are many ways to view a situation, and this flexibility reduces internal conflict. You no longer cling rigidly to the old ego. You become open to updating yourself. Intentional learning means you do not learn randomly. You learn what serves your direction. You choose skills aligned with your goals and values. When learning is connected to purpose, intrinsic motivation remains strong. You know why you are investing time and energy. This helps you move through inevitable periods of boredom. You do not learn to prove anything to anyone. You learn to become capable of living the life you want. Part 8 also emphasizes that learning has no finish line. It is a way of life. When you stop learning, you begin to contract. When you continue learning, you continue to expand. And that expansion does not only happen outwardly, but inwardly as well. You become more confident, calmer, and less threatened by change. You know that whatever lies ahead, you can learn how to handle it. Part 8 closes when you begin to feel a clear shift. You no longer see yourself as someone limited by current circumstances. You see yourself as someone accumulating capability. Each skill you learn expands the territory of your life. And as you continue to expand step by step, you realize that the world is not as small as you once believed. It was simply waiting for you to become capable enough to enter. Begins when you realize that action alone is not enough if you do not pause to look directly at the choices you have made. Many people act constantly, yet still do not go far because they repeat the same patterns of action with the same way of thinking. Reflection is not stopping to doubt yourself, but stopping to understand yourself more clearly. When you do not reflect, you live in automatic mode. You do a lot, but learn little. And when you learn little, it takes a very long time to move forward. Reflection is how you turn experience into wisdom. Each day carries information about how you use your time, energy, and attention. If you do not look back at that information, it passes without creating value. When you reflect, you begin to see repeating patterns. You recognize what helps you focus better, what drains you, and what consistently pulls you off course. This recognition is the foundation for accelerating inner growth. Without reflection, you are only hoping that tomorrow will be different. With reflection, you begin to know how to make tomorrow different. Reflection requires honesty. You cannot learn if you constantly justify yourself. When something does not work, reflection does not ask who is at fault, but asks what in this approach needs adjustment. This difference matters because it keeps you in an active position. You do not sink into self-blame, but you also do not avoid responsibility. You stand as an observer of yourself with a calm attitude. From that position, you can see details that you miss when you are swept up in action. Reflection also helps you understand your true motivations. Many decisions are made not because they align with long-term goals, but because they bring immediate comfort. When you look back at a day and ask why you chose as you did, you begin to see the role emotions played in your decisions. You notice when you acted from fear, when from fatigue, and when from clarity. This awareness is not for judgment, but for making better choices next time. When you understand what triggers your reactions, you can prepare in advance instead of being caught off guard. Reflection also gives you the chance to recognize progress you often overlook. Many people feel they are going nowhere because they only look at the remaining distance instead of the ground already covered. When you take time to look back, you begin to see that you handled pressure better, reacted more calmly, and persisted more than before. These changes matter because they strengthen the inner belief that you are developing. That belief fuels long-term motivation. Not explosive motivation, but steady motivation. Reflection also helps you adjust expectations. When you look back, you may see that some goals require more time than you assumed. Instead of labeling that as failure, you understand it as realistic pacing. This understanding reduces unnecessary pressure and helps you focus on doing things right rather than doing them fast. Reflection teaches patience with yourself. Not passive patience, but directed patience. You keep moving forward with deeper understanding of the process. Another major benefit of reflection is that it helps you detect hidden habits that slow you down. There are small behaviors you may not notice, but repeated long enough, they create significant impact. When you review how you use your time, you may see pockets lost to activities that do not serve your goals. When you review how you react to others, you may notice patterns that create unnecessary tension. Reflection brings these into the light, so you can choose differently. Without that light, you will continue repeating them without knowing why. Reflection also strengthens your ability to learn from mistakes. Mistakes are unavoidable when you take bold action. But some people stumble and move forward while others stumble and get stuck. The difference lies in how they reflect. Those who move forward ask what in this approach needs to change. Those who get stuck ask what is wrong with me. The first question leads to adjustment. The second leads to self-doubt. When you practice reflection properly, you turn mistakes into tools. Each setback no longer weakens you but provides information to step forward more steadily. Reflection also helps you connect present actions with the person you want to become. When you review a day, you can ask whether what you did today reflected your values. That question is powerful because it pulls you out of mechanical living and into intentional living. When you see misalignment, You do not need to condemn yourself. You simply adjust direction, and small daily adjustments create major change over time. Reflection also improves emotional regulation. When you spend time observing emotions instead of being carried by them, you begin to see them come and go. You realize that a strong emotion today does not define your entire identity. This awareness creates calm. You stop rushing into reactions or making important decisions at emotional peaks. You learn to wait for the mind to settle before acting. This is a critical skill during high-pressure periods. Reflection does not need to be complex or lengthy. It does not require rituals. It only requires honesty and consistency. A few simple questions repeated daily can create deep change. What today moved me closer to my goal? What pulled me off course? What can I adjust tomorrow? These questions keep you awake and proactive. They prevent you from drifting on inertia. Reflection also helps you see the link between small choices and large outcomes. When you review multiple days in a row, you begin to notice that days with preparation feel very different from days lived randomly. That difference does not come from luck but from choice. This awareness strengthens your sense of agency. You no longer feel pushed around by life. You clearly see that how you live today is creating tomorrow. Reflection is also where you learn to let go of what no longer serves you. There are habits, relationships, or goals that once fit but now only weigh you down. Without reflection, you tend to hold on to everything because it is familiar. With reflection, you gain the clarity to see what needs to end. Letting go is not loss, it is creating space, and space is essential for growth. Part 10 closes when you begin to see reflection, not as looking back to get stuck in the past, but as looking back to move forward faster. Each time you pause to observe, you sharpen your inner compass. You no longer walk in fog. You know where you are, what you have passed through, and what needs adjustment next. This clarity is quiet but powerful. It allows you to move forward with less waste, less repetition, and more awareness. And that is what makes your journey of growth not only long but deep. Begins when you realize that no skill or strategy can truly work if your emotional energy is constantly leaking. Many people have clear goals, discipline, and consistent action, yet still burn out repeatedly because they do not know how to master their inner emotional strength. Emotional energy is the silent foundation of all performance. When this foundation is weak, everything feels heavier than it needs to be. When this foundation is strong, you can go farther with less effort. Mastering emotional energy does not mean eliminating negative emotions. It means not allowing emotions to control your decisions. Emotions come and go like weather. If you stop every time it rains, you will never reach your destination. Mature individuals learn to keep moving through many emotional states. They do not deny emotions, but they also do not hand over the steering wheel to them. This distinction determines your mental endurance under pressure. Pressure is unavoidable. It appears whenever you do something meaningful. The issue is not whether pressure exists, but how you respond to it. When emotional energy is unmanaged, pressure easily turns into anxiety, irritability, or exhaustion. When it is mastered, pressure becomes a signal to adjust pace and priorities. You do not collapse under pressure, you learn from it. Mastering emotional energy begins with identifying points of leakage. There are repetitive thought patterns that quietly consume enormous energy without you noticing. Comparing yourself to others, dwelling on the past, worrying about the future, or trying to please everyone. These behaviors do not create progress, but they erode inner strength day after day. When you begin to observe moments where your energy drops, you gain the ability to choose differently. Not to become numb, but to become more aware. Another critical factor is how you handle disappointment. On a long journey, there will be days when effort is not immediately rewarded. If you tie your self-worth to short-term results, you will constantly rise and fall with circumstances. This is exhausting. Mastering emotional energy means separating your value from short-term fluctuations. You evaluate yourself based on whether you did what needed to be done, not on immediate external response. This separation creates an internal anchor that keeps you from being swept away by every small wave. Mental endurance is also built through how you speak to yourself when things do not go as planned. There are inner voices that drain energy rapidly. Voices that magnify mistakes, question your worth, and demand perfection. If you believe and follow these voices, you will remain in constant tension. Mastering emotional energy does not require replacing every negative thought with a positive one. It requires maintaining a neutral and fair internal voice. A voice that acknowledges difficulty without reaching negative conclusions. "I am facing a challenge" is very different from "I cannot do this." That small distinction saves immense energy. Mastering emotional energy also involves allowing yourself to feel without drowning in feeling. When you feel sad, you allow sadness within limits. When you feel tired, you acknowledge fatigue without using it as justification to abandon all commitments. Emotions are allowed to exist but not to dominate. When you establish this boundary, you no longer fear emotions. You know they will pass. And because you do not fear them, you are not controlled by them. Another major source of energy leakage is unresolved conflict. Lingering tensions in relationships, work, or within yourself, if left unaddressed, consume significant background energy. You may not think about them constantly, but they are always running like an application in the background. Mastering emotional energy means learning to face difficult conversations with maturity. You do not avoid forever because avoidance prolongs tension. You do not explode because explosion destroys connection. You choose clarity, respect, and timing. When conflicts are resolved, energy is released. You feel lighter, more focused, and more resilient. Mental endurance also depends on how you manage pace. Many people believe strength means always moving faster, but speed does not equal distance. If you constantly push beyond limits, you will quickly deplete energy. Mastering inner strength means knowing when to accelerate and when to maintain rhythm. You do not view rest as weakness. You see it as part of a long-term strategy. Rest at the right time preserves action quality when you return. This is especially critical when pursuing goals that require extended time. Mastering emotional energy also requires filtering what you allow into your mind. Not all information deserves your energy. Negative news, meaningless conflict, and constant external judgment can easily disorient you. Without boundaries around these inputs, you become emotionally reactive and unfocused. You do not need to withdraw from the world. You simply need to regulate exposure. When you protect mental space, you protect long-term focus. Another essential element of mental endurance is recovery. No one moves in a straight line. There will be moments of slipping, slowing down, or starting again from partway. Mastering emotional energy means not allowing these phases to define the entire journey. You allow yourself to recover without self-condemnation. You learn from experience and continue. The ability to rise faster after each setback matters more than never falling. When you trust your ability to recover, you stop fearing challenge. And when fear fades, you dare to go farther. Mastering emotional energy also strengthens presence. When you are not pulled excessively into past or future, you have more energy for the present. Presence elevates the quality of every action. You listen better, decide more accurately, and respond more calmly. You do not waste energy on scenarios that have not happened. You focus on what needs to be done now. Over time, this creates enormous impact. Mental endurance does not mean never feeling weak. It means continuing forward even when weakness appears. When you master emotional energy, you are no longer fully dependent on internal states to act. You can act across many emotional conditions while maintaining direction. This is a deep form of freedom. You are no longer imprisoned by emotion. You use emotion as information, not as command. Part 11 closes when you begin to feel a new stability. You no longer swing wildly with circumstances. You are no longer pulled into every small disturbance. You know how to preserve energy for what truly matters. Your inner strength becomes quiet, yet enduring. And that strength carries you forward on the long road ahead with the steadiness required not only to advance but to remain standing when strong winds arrive. begins when you understand that self-care is not a reward reserved for free time but a survival strategy for sustaining long-term inner strength. Many people treat rest, recovery, and nurturing the body and mind as secondary tasks only done when time remains. The truth is that if you do not intentionally care for yourself, life will eventually force you to stop in a far harsher way. The body and mind are not infinite machines. They require recovery in order to continue functioning at a high level. When you ignore this, you may move fast in the short term, but you will pay for it with exhaustion in the long run. Self-care here does not mean indulgence. It means responsibility. Responsibility for energy focus and the ability to continue the path you have chosen. When you care for yourself properly, you do not become weaker, you become more durable. This is especially important for those building a life through discipline and long-term effort. One core element of self-care is sleep. Sleep is not merely rest. It is the process of restoring the nervous system, consolidating memory, and regulating emotions. When you are sleep-deprived, everything becomes harder. Decision-making deteriorates, emotions are easily triggered, and discipline weakens. Many issues labeled as lack of motivation or willpower actually stem from an unrecovered body. When you prioritize sleep, you are directly investing in your ability to govern yourself the following day. Self-care also includes how you use your body. Movement is not only for physical health but for releasing stress accumulated in the nervous system. When you move regularly, you help the body process stress more effectively. You carry less pressure into the next day. This creates mental clarity and emotional stability. Movement does not need to be extreme, it needs to be consistent. A body used correctly becomes an ally rather than an obstacle. Nutrition is inseparable from this equation. What you consume daily directly affects energy levels and focus. When you constantly rely on inputs that cause unstable energy spikes and crashes, you will struggle to maintain steady momentum. Self-care means choosing to nourish the body with what allows it to function optimally, not according to trends but through honest listening. When the body is properly fueled, you require far less willpower to maintain discipline because baseline energy is already sufficient. Self-care also operates at the mental level. You need moments of quiet so the mind is not overloaded. In a world of constant stimulation, allowing yourself silence is an intentional act. When you never stop consuming information, you have no space to process and integrate. This creates a vague sense of overwhelm that leaves you tired without knowing why. Even brief moments of quiet help the nervous system slow down. You return to presence, and from that presence, you make better decisions. Self-care also involves what you say no to. A great deal of energy is drained by trying to meet expectations that do not align with your limits. When you consistently place others' needs above your boundaries, you will eventually deplete yourself. Self-care means respecting your limits enough to protect them. This does not make you selfish. It makes you sustainable. An exhausted person cannot support anyone for long. A person who protects their energy can show up more fully. Self-care also includes allowing yourself to recover after intense periods. There are times when you must push hard, but afterward you need a cool-down phase so the body and mind can rebalance. If you skip this phase, you accumulate fatigue until it erupts as burnout or disengagement. Recovery is not retreat, it is preparation for the next step. Those who understand this do not feel guilty for resting. They see rest as part of a long-term strategy. Self-care also reflects how you treat yourself on days when expectations are not met. If every slowdown is met with self-criticism and increased pressure, you create a harsh inner environment. No one can grow sustainably in such conditions. Self-care means maintaining seriousness about goals while also extending compassion to yourself. You do not lower standards, but you allow yourself to be human. When these two coexist, you sustain effort without losing balance. Another important aspect of self-care is maintaining sources of meaning. Discipline and long-term goals matter deeply, but when life becomes only obligation, you lose connection to your original why. Small moments of joy, connection, and aliveness replenish mental energy. When placed intentionally, they do not distract you. They remind you why the effort matters. When goals are tied to a life with quality, you gain motivation to continue. Self-care also involves early recognition of burnout signals. Persistent irritability, loss of focus, and a sense that everything feels heavy are signals. Ignoring them is not strength, it is lack of awareness. Those who master themselves adjust early. They do not wait for collapse before stopping. They regulate pace before it is too late. This allows long-term stability. Self-care is not something you do once and finish. It is a system that keeps you in a state capable of continued progress. With this system, you no longer live in cycles of stress and collapse. You move within a more sustainable rhythm. And within that rhythm, you can build significant things without sacrificing mental and physical health. Part 12 closes when you begin to see self-care as inseparable from strength. You no longer view rest, recovery, and energy protection as signs of weakness. You understand they are the foundation that allows you to remain standing during the most demanding phases. When you care for yourself with intention, you send a powerful message inward that this life is important enough to be built with endurance. And from that foundation, you can continue the path of growth with a stability and depth that very few people ever reach. Begins when you realize that no strength is sustainable without a clear compass to guide the way. You can have discipline, structure, energy, and consistent action, but if you do not know where you are going, you will soon feel lost. Goals are not only destinations. Goals reorganize how you use your time, energy, and attention each day. When goals are vague, every decision becomes heavy. You overthink, you are easily distracted, and you struggle to say no to what does not matter. When goals are clear, many decisions become simple. You know what deserves your effort and what does not. This clarity creates a sense of relief because you no longer have to constantly guess what to do next. The right goals are not grand slogans or vague wishes. They are specific enough to guide action. Saying you want to be better does not help you act. When you clearly define which skills you are building, which outcomes you are pursuing, and why they matter, goals begin to carry weight. That weight does not come from pressure but from meaning. When you understand why you are doing what you are doing, you can continue even on days without motivation. Clear goals also connect the present to the future. Each small action today no longer feels isolated. It becomes part of a larger picture. When you see this connection, you stop viewing small tasks as meaningless. You understand that those small actions are laying the foundation for something bigger. This raises the quality of effort. You do not just get things done. You act with presence and intention. Goals also function as a filter. Every day brings countless demands and opportunities. Not all of them fit. Without clear goals, you are pulled toward whatever feels most urgent or appealing. With goals, you can ask whether this brings you closer to the direction you chose. If the answer is no, you can decline without guilt. This filter protects your time and energy from being scattered. It helps you focus on what truly makes a difference. Clear goals also allow you to measure progress in a healthy way. Instead of relying on feelings, you rely on concrete criteria. You know whether you are moving forward or standing still. With data, you can adjust strategy. Without clear goals, you only have emotions, and emotions are rarely reliable measures. Goals make progress observable and improvable. This matters deeply on long journeys because it prevents you from getting lost in vague uncertainty. Goals also support patience. When you know what you are pursuing, you accept that some results take time. You do not rush to conclusions when visible change has not yet appeared. You continue working because you trust the direction. This trust is not blind. It is built on clarity and consistency. When you look back and see that you are still doing things aligned with your goals, you have reason to continue. Clear goals also help you adjust when needed. There are times when you realize that the original direction no longer fits. Without clear goals, it is hard to recognize this because you do not know what standard you are measuring against. With goals, you can honestly assess whether a direction still serves your values. Adjustment is no longer failure. It is a sign of maturity. You do not cling to a path simply because you have walked it for a long time. You choose direction based on present understanding. Goals also have a powerful effect on intrinsic motivation. When goals align with personal values, you do not need to force yourself excessively. You want to continue because the pursuit reflects who you want to become. This motivation differs from reward-based motivation. It lasts longer because it comes from internal agreement. You do not need constant reminders. You remind yourself because you know why it matters. Clear goals also reduce comparison. When you know where you are going, you are less distracted by others' paths. You understand that each person has different rhythms and priorities. Comparison loses power when you focus on your own progress. You no longer need to prove anything to anyone. You only need to be honest with your goals. This releases a significant amount of mental energy. Goals also help you manage disappointment. When results fall short, you can review whether the strategy needs adjustment or whether more time is required. You do not rush to conclude that you are not good enough. You analyze and refine. Clear goals provide this analytical frame. They help you process failure constructively rather than emotionally. Goals also teach you how to break down the big into the manageable. Long-term goals can feel overwhelming if viewed all at once. When you divide them into smaller milestones, you create a sense of ongoing progress. Each milestone reinforces belief that you are on the right path. This belief is essential for sustaining long-term effort. You do not need to see the entire road. You only need to see the next step. Goals help you identify that step. Clear goals also maintain consistency of identity. When you repeatedly act in alignment with your goals, you reinforce the image of who you are becoming. You are not only working toward goals, you are living in alignment with them. This alignment creates a sense of wholeness. You no longer feel like you are living two lives, one for others and one for yourself. You live with greater integrity. This brings a deep sense of peace. Goals also need to be revisited regularly, not to create pressure, but to maintain direction. In the flow of work and responsibility, it is easy to forget the original reason. When you take time to revisit goals, you reconnect with deeper motivation. This helps you recalibrate priorities and avoid being pulled into what does not matter. Revisiting goals does not require ceremony. It can be simple. One question each morning about what matters most today. One moment each evening to see whether the day aligned with your direction. These moments keep your inner compass accurate. Part 13 closes when you begin to feel the power of clarity. You no longer chase every direction. You are no longer scattered by too many options. You know what deserves your time and energy. Your goals are not a burden. They are an anchor. They hold you steady amid noise. They move you forward when the road is long and results are not yet visible. And when you live each day with a clear compass, you do not just move faster. You move more accurately. Begins when all the separate pieces of your journey start connecting into a new identity that is clearer and more solid. This is no longer the stage where you are merely trying to do each individual thing better. This is when mindset, habits, discipline, action, and goals merge into a consistent way of living. You no longer have to constantly remind yourself who you are supposed to become. You begin to act naturally as that person. This integration does not happen in a dramatic moment. It happens quietly, through hundreds of small choices, repeated long enough to become part of who you are. When the new identity forms, you feel a deep shift in how you face life. Things that once required enormous effort now feel familiar. You no longer need to use as much willpower to do the right thing. Doing the right thing begins to feel aligned with who you are. This is a sign that identity has shifted. You are not just acting with discipline. You are a disciplined person. You are not just trying to think clearly. You are someone who thinks clearly. When identity changes, behavior follows far more naturally. Before, each right decision felt like a battle. Now it feels like an obvious choice. This integration also reduces inner conflict. You no longer have to constantly convince yourself to follow the path you chose. The parts of you no longer pull in different directions. Thinking, goals, and actions begin to agree. This creates a very real sense of relief. You no longer spend energy fighting yourself. That energy is released for building and creating. One of the clearest signs of integration is how you respond to challenge. Before, difficulty easily triggered self-doubt. Now, difficulty triggers focus. You no longer ask why this is happening to you. You ask what you need to adjust to handle this better. That question reflects a mature identity. You no longer see challenge as a threat to personal worth. You see it as an inevitable part of growth. This shift matters because it allows you to remain stable even when conditions are unfavorable. The new identity also shows in how you manage failure. When you slip off plan or results fall short, you do not collapse. You do not return to old stories about not being good enough. You assess the situation more realistically. You analyze what did not work, what needs adjustment, and you continue. This ability shows that you no longer tie your self-worth to individual outcomes. You know who you are even when something fails. That stability is the foundation of long-term strength. Integration also appears in how you use time. You are no longer pulled into too many unimportant tasks. You clearly know your priorities and act in alignment with them. Your time reflects your values. This does not happen because you force yourself to be more disciplined each day. It happens because you have become someone who values those things. When values and actions align, you live with far less internal friction. This creates a deep sense of wholeness. The new identity also changes how you interact with others. You are no longer easily triggered by judgment or comparison. You understand that everyone is at a different stage. You no longer need to defend an old ego because you are no longer defined by it. Your confidence becomes quiet but clear. You do not need to prove much. Your presence alone creates impact. Others sense this steadiness even when you do not speak about it. This does not distance you. It allows you to connect more authentically because you are no longer interacting from insecurity. Integration also shows in how little you are shaken by small changes. You have built a foundation strong enough to absorb shocks. When disruption occurs, you adjust instead of panic. You do not need to rebuild from scratch after every setback. You adjust from the foundation you already have. This allows you to maintain momentum over the long term. Not because everything goes smoothly, but because you have become adaptable. The new identity is also paired with mature humility. You know you have come farther than before, but you also know the journey is not finished. You do not become complacent because you understand growth is continuous. This humility keeps you open to learning and adjustment. You do not cling to a fixed image of yourself. You allow yourself to keep updating. This is essential because it prevents you from getting stuck in past success. Integration also makes responsibility feel lighter. Before, responsibility may have felt heavy. Now it feels empowering. You no longer see responsibility as a burden placed on you. You see it as the right to choose and lead your own life. This shift makes long-term commitment easier. You do not force yourself to keep commitments. You keep them because they align with who you have become. When the new identity stabilizes, you begin living with less contradiction between what you think, what you say, and what you do. This consistency creates deep inner security. You no longer play different roles in different contexts. You bring the same core into every area of life. This does not make you rigid. It makes you clear. You remain flexible in approach but firm in values. Another important sign of integration is how you view the past. You are no longer trapped in regret or self-blame. You see the past as a sequence of lessons that brought you here. You understand that without periods of confusion, failure, and inner conflict, you would not have your current foundation. This acceptance frees you from old emotional weight. You no longer fight previous versions of yourself. You feel gratitude toward them for helping you grow. The new identity also changes how you see the future. You no longer need to visualize every detail to feel safe. You trust your ability to handle what comes. That trust is not vague. It is built on what you have already done. You know that whatever lies ahead you can learn, adjust, and continue. This confidence creates a powerful calm. You do not need to control everything. You only need to keep living according to the structure and values you have chosen. Part 14 closes when you realize that who you are becoming no longer depends on temporary effort. It is sustained by an integrated internal system. Mindset, discipline, action goals, and self-care are no longer separate parts. They have become a way of life. And when this way of life is maintained long enough, you do not just change your own life. You become someone capable of creating sustainable change regardless of circumstance. You have reached the end of this journey. And if you are still here, it means that a very deep part of you is ready to live differently. What you have just heard is not a momentary, inspirational story, but a map that helps you clearly see why you were stuck, why effort did not lead to change, and what truly allows a person to restructure their life from the ground up. You have seen how habits shape identity, why discipline is stronger than motivation, why mindset must be restructured, how to design life structure to reduce resistance, how to master energy to avoid burnout, and how to set direction so you do not lose your way. All of this leads to one single point. Life changes when you stop living by inertia and begin living with intention each day. Thank you for giving your time and attention to walk this entire journey. If this content offered you a new perspective or caused you to pause and reflect on yourself, please like the video to support the channel. Share it with those you believe are also seeking inner transformation. And do not forget to subscribe to continue accompanying deep stories about personal growth, motivation, and life philosophy in future videos. Your journey does not end here. It has only just begun.